Hey cats, it's Eddbud here. I have an initial review today for you of a new shoe from Nike. It is the Vomero 17. Brand new design refresh of the very popular Vomero model here. No air units this time round, but once again we have Virgin zoomx in the midsole. Best Nike trainer right now? Let's find out. Welcome back to the channel, people, or if it's your first time here, where have you been? Hit that subscribe button to help get us to 1 million subscribers. But also give this video a thumbs up like, you know it makes sense. The Nike Vomero 17 here in hand in my UK size 11, US 12. It's 333 grams or 11.7 ounces. So that makes it 2 grams lighter than the last version. I'm clocking a colossal 41mm here of heel stack, and we got about 31mm up front. So it's still about a 9 or 10mm drop from heel to toe. The previous version I had about 35mm of heel stack, so that says all you need to know. I got about 12 centimeters here in the widest part of the forefoot and 9.8 centimeters in the heel, so it's pretty much the same dimensions as the Vomero 16. Certainly it seems that Nike are trying to get more of that zoomx cushion underfoot here in this new version of the shoe. I have picked this shoe up with my own earth credits from sportsshoes.com here in the UK. It doesn't appear to be available though on Nike's own website yet, so don't quite know what they're doing there. We will start as usual with the upper first. So this shoe, upperwise, kind of reminds me a little bit of a cross between the Boston 12 from Adidas and also Nike's own Pegasus 40 to some degree. We've got a nice low profile around the ankle. I really do like the sort of range of movement I've got back here, and the nice heel flare as well, taking us back to sort of 2018 with the Pegasus 35. I do like the tongue padding. They've got it in just the right places here. I didn't get any sort of pressure on the top of the foot. Perhaps a little bit more refined, I guess, in the tongue than the Vomero 16, which was very puffy. There was an awful lot to it, and it got very, very wet with moisture when it was raining. I do find this a little bit more breathable than the predecessor as well. The mesh is reasonably thin. The Vomero model always seems to have a little bit more width in the toe box there, but this time round it's actually quite a low profile affair. There's not a huge amount of height here, so if you've got quite voluminous toes you may be screaming in pain. Let's hope not. I think if you've got a wider foot you'll probably get on okay actually in this shoe really. There's no very prominent arch section to this shoe. If you found that in some other Nike shoes, then I think this one will be a bit of a breath of fresh air. Just do be aware about that slightly lower profile toe box here in terms of height. I think it's actually down to the mesh that they've used in this version of the shoe. It just doesn't flex all that much. I have to say I really like the actual design of this shoe aesthetically. Reminds me of old Spectrum games from like the 80s, sort of those monochrome colour clash nightmares. I have to say I found the fit actually pretty good. The upper's probably one of the better parts of this shoe. Not to spoil the rest of the review for you, it's certainly a more traditional running shoe feel than the Invincible 3. Not a lot of people like the upper on that one at all. Kind of like a more plush feeling version of the Pegasus model. Though strangely it's round about the same weight as the Pegasus, so you try and do the maths and work it out. I've tried and I can't. So I do like the slightly thinner materials here, though it's got a bit more of a plush, comfortable feel in terms of the upper. I think it's probably the best part of the shoe. I'm going to give it a 2.8 out of 3 so far after my initial runs.
Midsole now.
So we've got some quite interesting and surprising changes here in the Vomero 17 over its predecessor. I think they're trying to elevate this model closer to something like the Kinvara Pro perhaps, or the Super Blast, though both of those shoes are quite a bit lighter than the Vomero 17. We do have that dual layer midsole here. Hopefully you can see where the split occurs here. It looks like there's quite a lot of zoomx actually in the heel, but it's one of those shoes where you've got a considerable sidewall on both sides there, medial and lateral side, so your foot kind of sits in a cup at the back of the shoe in the heel. After about 13 miles of initial running in the shoe, I have to say I am missing the forefoot air unit from the Vomero 16. Now the dual layer foams here work well if you're running sort of like easier or sort of steady pace, provide a nice smooth ride, it has to be said, but I wouldn't suggest it's the most lively of rides that I've experienced this year in any running shoes really. Certainly a model that's going to appeal if you perhaps want to do some longer efforts or you need some reliable protection. I guess you could even use it for some sort of recovery type efforts due to the zoomx there on top of that sort sort of cushlon 3.0. I have to say the cushlon 3.0 kind of feels like standard cushlon to me. I really did feel that the Vomero 16 with that 4-foot air unit just gave you a little bit more pop. Just felt like a slightly more exciting shoe to run in. That's probably a little bit down to the lower stack. The larger stack does elevate the shoe, no pun intended, outside of previous territory here. Nike do seem to be adjusting their running shoe lineup to mimic that of some of the other manufacturers with much higher stacked offerings. I think for some people the midsole changes here will make perfect sense. A slightly more durable, firmer bottom section of the shoe with that cushlon 3.0, topped with some of that zoomx foam. Though the step-in squash that you feel from this shoe really is down to the quite thick insole that Nike have supplied. So don't be fooled, people. When you put them on and walk around the house, you know, when you get running in them, the zoomx isn't really all that apparent. Though I think these days you've got to have a bit more stack there to attract people to possibly purchase the shoe. Now, a combo of foams here like this might make people think, ooh, it's a bit like the Pegasus Turbo. Quite the different shoe here. It's nowhere near as sort of responsive and lively and exciting to run in as the Peg Turbo. You gotta keep on waiting, people. The shoe does feel a little bit strange to me back here in the heel. Perhaps if you're a predominant heel striker, this sort of void where the midsole has been sort of cut away gave me sort of similar sensations to the Asics Nova Blast series, though not in a good way. It just kind of feels a bit odd underfoot. Not really trampoline-like, it just feels like the outer sections of the rubber here and the midsole are a little bit too prominent. Though I do have to state that this shoe is drastically heavier than the more nimble Nova Blast. So for me, it's another slightly odd update. The Vomero 16 was a good sort of do-it-all type of shoe. This one's a little bit more locked into sort of easier or sort of steady paces for me. I certainly wouldn't be wanting to run any sort of faster threshold type efforts in it. So there's loads of other shoes that kind of do the same thing but with less bulk. I'll give it a 2.4 out of 3 for the midsole after my initial runs. Outsole wise, we've got some significant waffle lugs here. They're switched up into 4 sections on the underside of the shoe. They are numerous and they stretch in size from the heel through to the forefoot. You've got a few splits here to facilitate a little bit of flex, certainly where you need it. You can feel the rubber in this shoe. It is quite considerable in the Vomero 17. Thick for me and slightly overblown in the heel. It does make the heel wearer feel a little bit sort of rigid and clunky. I think the mix of the ridges and the waffles that we had in the last version of the shoe was pretty much perfect. Just looking at the other one, it just felt a little bit more malleable, I suppose. Not quite as aggressive, though still very versatile. I think that's going to make this shoe a very durable one, but do you really need all of that rubber? Especially when you're advertising, you know, zoomx here. Kind of gives people the idea it's going to be light and nimble, where you've lowered the weight using the zoomx and then you're sort of putting it all into the outsole of the shoe. I just don't really feel you need all of this. It's just another very perplexing approach from Nike. I do struggle to figure out why they're kind of constantly putting more effort into what appears to be the look of the shoe rather than the functionality. I mean, grip was decent on my initial runs. I can't say it was poor. The lugs are well spaced out. You know, no debris is going to get stuck anywhere in there. You're going to easily be able to clean the shoe, no problem. One observation here to make is that as you wear down the rubber, you'll see little white specks in it. I think that's where Nike are using some sort of recycled rubber stuff. I'm not sure if you'll be able to pick up any of it there, but there's little white specks beginning to appear. So it's perfectly serviceable. I just think there's too much of it, really. I was hoping for a little bit of a reduction in weight in this one. It just seems to be more locked into a very specific use case now. It works well enough. I'll give it a 2.6 out of 3 so far. There is a little bit of very light wear already, though, after 13 miles, which is a bit of a surprise. Value now. As I stated earlier, I paid 145 quid for this shoe from sportshoes.com. Nobody sent it to me for a review or anything. I can see this shoe lasting a whole bunch of miles. There's a huge amount of rubber there. I think the combination of cushlon and zoomx will last a long time as well. You're using it for a sort of everyday training shoe, great, but 145 quid's quite a lot to pay for an everyday shoe. Just weird design things here, like the extra side walls here of zoomx. It's such a soft material, is it really providing any sort of stability? Makes the shoe look taller, I suppose, and more cushioned than it is. I assume that that is the reason for their inclusion. I think the shoe kind of does what you expect it to from the price point. If you're a Nike fan, you know, you got the Pegasus at £115, you got the Invincible Run at 175, and this is sort of smack bang in the middle. It's kind of a middle ground between those two offerings. Don't think it's got the squash of the Invincible Run though. It certainly is a decent quality shoe out the box, one of the better ones I've received from Nike over the last few years. I think the durability is going to be pretty reasonable due to the excessive rubber. I just think it's another okay use of the zoomx material within a daily shoe. There hasn't really been an outstanding one, perhaps since the Pegasus Turbo. I mean, you've got zoomx here, but it really isn't delivering a full zoomx type experience. It's more being used to explain how comfortable the shoe might be, rather than how sort of pacey and nimble it might make you feel. Can I recommend people to pick this one up at that sort of retail price? The answer is no. It's an okay shoe, but there's lots of other okay or better shoes that don't cost 145 quid. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 3 for value after my initial runs. If you just want a daily or easy shoe, then yeah, it's not a bad option. But there's lots of others out there. If I have totaled the scores up correctly, that gives us 10.3 out of 12 after my initial runs for the Nike Vomero 17. It's an okay shoe, but it's nothing to write home about really. Have you picked this one up? How are you finding it? Are you thinking about picking it up? Or were you a big fan of the 16? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Quick musical interlude for you. One of my favourite albums from way back is by the Flaming Lips, called Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. Flight Test has always been one of my favourites. When I saw the band perform the song live, really blows your mind. There's some fantastic stuff going on here. Crazy drums that sound like they've been sort of chopped up by a sort of drum and bass artist. There's some squelchy synthesizers going on, almost like a Neil Young style vocal on top of everything. Just wild effects and production across the whole thing. It sounds like nothing else really. Nobody else sounds like the Flaming Lips, you know, at this point to the day really. They always had this wonderful way of introducing strings into a track that didn't sound like cheesy or really sort of standard or classical. This really lifts the spirits, this song. It's a fantastic tune. The rest of the album's pretty good too. Go and check it out. Flight Test by the Flaming Lips. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hope you enjoyed the review. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you